So this is going to be our final session on this. There is one more section on here. If folks feel strongly about getting together and working through the final session, you are more than welcome to gather next week at 9 o'clock on Wednesday and work your way through that together. The video is on here. I will not be participating because next week things get a little hairy work-wise for me. But if people would like to come and gather, I'm more than happy to give you the materials and say, have at it. So we will gather again as a whole group at some point in the future. More specifically, April 10th. Yes, I am taking off after Easter.
Yeah.
So yeah, we will gather at that point, and we are going to turn to 2 Corinthians, and we'll go from there.
Kim, are you going to read next?
Gosh darn it.
She was just hoping nobody would bring that up.
Well, you guys can put in a silent vote and pass it around later, and we'll.
She did a very good job.
That's what I heard.
And between her and
I did a job. let's
Dan,
just say that.
they got everything good. with
Yeah,
them.
and Nancy did a great prayer, so
Yeah.
it's easy to do in here because there was good discussion. So if y'all want to meet, I'll do the work. Just let me know by the end of the session.
Okie dokie.
How do people feel? Do they want to meet next week?
I will.
It's shredded.
I can't.
Oh.
Or 2 or more gathered, so I'll be happy to be here.
Okay. Well, let us go ahead and start with our opening prayer here. Gracious God, your blessed Son came down from heaven to be the true bread that gives life to the world. Give us this bread always, that he may live in us and we in him, and that strengthened by this food, we may live as his body in the world. Through Jesus Christ, our Savior and Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Let's go ahead and in your books, turn to page 218, and we will recite together the section of the Small Catechism on the sacrament of the altar. I'll go ahead and ask the question, and then I'll invite people to respond. And we're gonna get crazy. We're actually gonna start around the outside. So we'll start with Debbie. What is the sacrament of the altar, Debbie?
It is the true body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ under the bread and wine instituted by Christ himself for us Christians to eat and to drink.
Marty, where is this written?
The holy evangelists Matthew, Mark, Luke, and St. Paul write thus: in the night in which he was betrayed, our Lord Jesus Christ took bread and gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat, this is my body given for you. Do this for the remembrance of me." Again, after supper, he took the cup, gave thanks, gave it for all to drink, saying, "This is the cup of my new covenant of my blood, shed for you and for all. For the forgiveness of sin, do this in remembrance for me."
Elise, what is the benefit of such eating and drinking?
The words "given for you" and "shed for you for the forgiveness of sin" show us that forgiveness of sin, life, and salvation are given to us in the sacrament through these words, because where there is forgiveness of sin, there is also life and salvation.
Ruth, how can bodily eating and drinking do such a great thing?
Eating and drinking certainly do not do it, but rather the words that are recorded, given for you and shed for you for the forgiveness of sin. These words, when accompanied by the physical eating and drinking, are the essential thing in the sacrament, and whoever believes these words has what they declare and state, namely forgiveness of sin.
Gail, who then receives this sacrament worthily?
Fasting and bodily preparation are in fact a fine external discipline. But a person who has faith in these words, given for you and shed for you for the forgiveness of sin, is really worthy and well prepared. However, a person who does not believe these words or doubts them is unworthy and unprepared, because the words for you require truly believing hearts.
All right. Let us go to our video here.
Communion. It's a central part of Christian faith, but it is also viewed as one of the most mysterious parts of that faith. It originated at the Last Supper. Jesus broke bread and gave it to the disciples. He told them it was his body and that they should eat it for the remembrance of him. Then he gave them his cup of wine and told them to drink, for it was his blood, shed for all people for the forgiveness of sin. And we continue this practice today. We all know as Christians that communion is important, but what exactly is going on when we receive it? Some believe that the bread and wine literally transforms into the divine flesh and blood of Jesus. Others believe that it is still bread and wine, but that Jesus is now somehow within it. But if the wine and bread don't look any different throughout the ceremony, does it just remain regular wine and bread? Is anything actually happening? Or is communion just another symbol of our faith, since we were told to receive it in remembrance of Jesus? Or is there something truly powerful and divine occurring? And if that is the case, why does it take the form of common, everyday food? If it's so important, shouldn't there be more to it? On top of all that, the question of how it changes remains a mystery. Where does the specialness of communion come from? Is the person who gives you communion doing something to make it divine? Does it need to be blessed by a member of the clergy? Or can any Christian administer communion if it is a symbolic ceremony? And so the question persists. Is communion divine? Or is communion symbolic? Symbolically divine? Divinely symbolic? When talking about communion, Martin Luther has a different focus. He says that communion is about you and your relationship with the person who told us to eat the bread and drink the wine in the first place. Jesus.
I think every video has a pointer to the rock. Cracks me up. Oh. Be like,
Okay. Did that answer all of our questions? Are we completely enlightened now? Good. Good. Well, in that case, we can go for a beer.
It's 12 o'clock somewhere.
I like that you said it's 12 o'clock somewhere.
That's right. I'm gonna wait till 5.
Not even that it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Wow. All right. Well, for some reason, I did just get really thirsty. Okay, yeah, what did we come across? Well, let me start first. Anything in the video that really reached out and grabbed you and shook you?
A lot of questions.
Yeah, for sure.
We do not have a layperson distributing communion, correct? Because I can remember when Corlin would preach, I think the thing was he couldn't administer communion.
We do not have lay people preside for communion. We have lay people distribute.
Oh, distribute, okay, but they can't, but the pastor has to be there in order for them to
Yes,
act. in their place.
pastor
Okay.
or in certain cases, the bishop can give people special pastor type authority to preside for communion.
So
Which,
not even deacons and deaconesses?
right, unless they have special authorization, which I'm a little conflicted about that. In the Lutheran Church, the understanding has always been the word and the sacraments are gifts given to the whole church. But because we recognize the body of Christ is made up of many members with differing functions and gifts, that some members of the church are identified as people who have the right skills and temperament to be stewards of these gifts, and we call these people pastors. And pastors in the Lutheran Church, at least, spend a lot of time and money going to school and going through a process to prepare them to do these things. So you can either do that, or depending on where you are, you could just call the bishop's office and say, hey, we don't have a pastor. Can I do communion for our church? And there will be some conversation or whatever with the person and the congregation and the bishop's office, and they might say, yeah, go for it. So what have I done with those years of my life and those
Because
thousands
you
of
trained for way
dollars?
more than just distributing communion. You trained to do many other things that a typical layperson I would be offered to do.
Same with marriage licenses. Marrying people, you get a mail order thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's not even mail order. You do it online now.
Yeah.
If you'll indulge just a moment of, or as Johann Eck said, excuse my kind indulgences. Thank you. The best is when you have somebody who calls you and they know not only are you a pastor, but you've gone and gotten your doctorate, and they say, hey, I just got ordained at the online seminary, the World Universal Church, or whatever it is. I sent in my 1995, and within 10 minutes, they emailed me back with my certificate of ordination, and I'm going to be presiding for my friend's wedding, which is why I got ordained. So what should I say when I'm doing this? Can you send me some prayers and stuff, and then
Charge them
tell me,
$19.95 and do it.
and then tell me what I should say for the message? I'm like, do you have any clue how
It's funny.
insulting this is, that you're saying you're as qualified as me when you have proven that your credit card has at least $20 worth of credit on it?
They could Google how to do that. They don't need to call you.
Anyway, so yeah, typically in the Lutheran Church, it is a ordained clergy person that will preside for the for communion. And please use the word preside. Please do not use the word do. Can you do communion? Anyway,
I have a question.
yes.
Our old church, we still get mailings out from their monthly newsletter.
Mhm.
And there's a section in there where they're looking for people to just take communion to people that are shut-ins or whatever.
Mhm.
Now, in that case, there's some training, it's not, I don't know, no hard or anything, but when they take it, is it already bread and wine and blessed?
Yes, typically it is stuff that has been consecrated on Sunday but has not been consumed. Typically is what they'll do when you send communion out to people. Sometimes there may be, you know, a short time of worship with the people who are bringing the communion out, and you would share communion together with the people who are distributing it and then send it out. But yeah, typically it comes from worship within the community, which I think also sends the nice message that, you know, you really are partaking of the same bread and cup as the rest of the community. But yeah, typically it is consecrated by the pastor or somebody in that capacity.
I think also anything that's not, once it's been blessed, if it hasn't been consumed, it needs to go back to the earth. Yes, that's what
Yeah.
I did.
Leftovers, right?
Anything, right, with the wine. I was a secretary at a church 15 years ago. And I would help out with that on Monday. If there was still wine left in the chalice, I would go, but I was to put it not down the sink.
Right,
It went out and it went into the ground.
yes.
Back to-
Or
It's a
you
little
could drink
different
it.
with Catholics than when I first got here and Terry was involved in altar shows. When we went back to clean up after services, I was kind of struck by, what do you mean you're throwing it out the door? You didn't do that in the Catholic Church. Heck no, that had to be either eaten or disposed of in a different way. Usually they just put it in the tabernacle and kept it for the next time. So yeah, taking a cup of wine, you either had to drink it, the priest had to drink it, or someone would do that. And no, you don't pour it out in the grass. You don't throw the wafers out on the grass for the birds either. So it was a whole different way of handling it. And it was kind of like, whoa, what are you guys doing?
And at the church I went to, they had a special sink that went right down into the ground
Mhm.
that they could dispose of wine. So it didn't go into the usual, sewer.
Well, yeah, I'm sure various churches handled it differently, but no, I know from when I would go to church, to mass, anything that was left over, that was part of the mass where the priest would finish up everything that was there, and if it was taken in the back, as altar boys, yeah, they'd be chugging the wine.
Wow.
That's why.
This was a Catholic church too, but it was just probably a different one.
Yes.
I'll never forget one time, a bird flew into the church and landed in the wine. It was, didn't know what to do with it.
That actually is the origin of a lot of the stuff that veils the sacraments. And then sometimes in the older churches, you'll see the baldachin. It looks like the little canopy over the altar. Many of those things originated for that exact reason, that a lot of the times the church buildings were in warmer climates and it was easier. They had more windows open and stuff. So birds would get in. It was just kind of normal. But they thought, let's at least cover up what we're going to be eating so the birds don't do their thing. Yes. It's like that Far Side, how birds see the world and you're looking down and everything has a bullseye on it. So yeah, obviously communion practices vary tremendously from place to place. I spoke to one colleague who is more out of a Reformed tradition, and they said, communion is kind of on the side of the church, and if people want communion as church is ending, they can go over and get it on their way out. So you've got, kind of on that end of the spectrum, all the way over to, there are some churches that will will rarely celebrate communion. Get into some of like the Baptist and Pentecostal churches, and communion is not a big deal. It's not something that happens real often. You move across over into the Catholic Church, and without communion, without the sacrament, it's kind of like, well, what are we doing here? And I'm not even sure what the Orthodox churches do, but I'm sure communion is a big deal. And then
Sorry, this has been bothering me probably for 60 years.
okay,
Please get it off your chest.
So.
let me see if I can undo this in one morning.
I went to Augustana Lutheran, which is now ECLA. Can the pastors decide what they want to do about communion, meaning who can get it? Or is it a synod? We had one pastor, this has been bothering me and he would not let anybody except Lutherans have communion. And when my husband and I got married, he was Methodist and he could not take communion, and we never went back to the Lutheran church for many, many years because of that. And it was not Missouri Sin or anything. Was he just able to decide that?
But he was American Lutheran.
There's
Well, our church was.
most often those types of decisions are made more at the level of whatever the highest level of the church is, whether it's a national body or whatever, kind of sets the policy. But in a lot of churches, the pastor in practice has the latitude to make those decisions. It would be very unusual for, say, somebody in an ELCA church to say, yeah, only Lutherans or only our brand of Lutherans can take communion. That would be extremely unusual. On the flip side, there are Missouri Synod churches, the official doctrine handed down from St. Louis is, if you ain't Missouri Synod, you ain't coming to the table. There are congregations, and they do not say it loudly, where they say, you are welcome at the table because it's God's table. I have even come across once in a great while a Catholic church that will say, we welcome everybody who wants to take the sacrament. So typically the pastor doesn't make those calls on his own. Typically that is done at a higher place. And it could be that, that was just the practice that pastor grew up with, or the practice that pastor learned in seminary or whatever. But I would say it's unusual.
And it was 60 years ago, not like now.
So, and there's that.
Maybe at one time it was in the Missouri Synod.
That could
He was American Lutheran.
be, like even the Catholics, I mean,
ALC.
Griffith wouldn't do my brother's baptism, but we went to OLG and they did. So.
Is it still kind of practice for some religions to only serve the bread and not the wine? Or is that gone?
That, I don't think that is common practice anywhere anymore. There's a movement or a group within the Catholic Church that are, I don't remember what they're called. They're extremely old school. So kitty corner from the middle school, well, back in our day, we called it junior high. From the junior high school that Andrea went to, the crosstown rival of my junior high, there is a congregation that they are the old school Catholics. Like I said, I don't think they refer to themselves as old school, but like You walk in, you need to have your shoulders and your knees covered. Women need to have something covering their heads. They do the Latin mass. My father-in-law said he went there once just out of curiosity, and he said it's like being in a scary time machine. And so at a church that kind of follows that tradition, it would not surprise me if only the priest took the wine. But the general practice in every church that I am aware of is all of the people share the bread and the cup.
Yeah, when I went to Catholic school, we did not get wine. We only got the bread.
And why was that? Do you know?
I don't know, but the priest drank the wine and, yeah, we only got the wafers. And from what, I understand now it's different, but I've not been to
I
it.
think the cynical answer is wine's expensive.
That probably had something to do with it.
Possibly.
In the old days.
At least,
you were a minor, you can't drink.
Expensive.
Oh.
it may have had something to do with, only the priest was the one who was holy enough for the wine. Yeah, I suspect some of it had to do with bread is usually easier to come by. I'm not sure exactly. But I bet there are reams and reams of books written about it in some abbey library somewhere. One of the things that I think we want to make sure we take from Luther's thoughts on communion, you may have at some point heard the terms transubstantiation and consubstantiation. And those refer to differing understandings of the precise way in which Jesus is present at communion. In transubstantiation, this comes out of a long line of medieval scholastic theologians who talk about, what is the actual substance versus its incidental properties. Well, just because it looks like bread and smells like bread and tastes like bread doesn't mean that it's actually bread. Like, so what if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck?
Chicken.
And so there was a lot of thought on, when exactly does it change from being bread to being Jesus? When does it change from being wine to being Christ's blood? There's a lot of ink spilled on the process through which, you might think it's bread, but it's not. That's transubstantiation. The substance actually crosses some sort of line. It transits across. Consubstantiation is kind of like what they sum up here on pages 150 and 151. In sum, Luther is more interested in the fact that Christ is present than in how Christ is present. It's just that, Jesus says, this is my body, this is my blood. If Jesus says it, it should be good enough. And there is not a lot of interest in how does that happen? Do we have to ring a bell when that happens? If you stop in the middle of saying the words of institution, is it like halfway Jesus and halfway not? Luther and Lutheran theologians since then are a lot less interested in the specifics and a lot more interested in the fact that Jesus promises to be there, so we can trust the promise. Jesus says, this is my body, this is my blood. Okay, amen. So that I think is a key thing to lift up.
One quick thing, I heard one time somebody preaching on the radio that fundamentalists, no doubt, about criticizing the Catholic way of having communion, where it's literally, his argument was that they're claiming to re-sacrifice Jesus in order for this to happen. And, in the New Testament only, it says, you know, he died once
Once and
for all.
not-
Yep.
Mhm.
So
Not every
they didn't
day.
like that.
Yeah, and that actually came up in December. We had a panel discussion with a guy from the Reformed Seminary and a guy from Holy Name Parish in Cedar Lake and myself. And we we're talking about differing practices around communion. And what the guy from Holy Name was saying is that there's the language of sacrifice used. The understanding is not that we're actually re-sacrificing Jesus. He said that's not, he said, you know, I absolutely understand, you know, how people can hear the words and get that impression. He goes, it's not the understanding, not the intent. I don't remember precisely what he said was the direction, but yes, that is definitely something that comes up. You know, may our sacrifice be you know, acceptable to you, O God. And a lot of people are going, you know, Jesus died once for all. It's right there in scripture. So yes, that particular issue has come up many times. Yes.
I like how in the video at the very end, they said, what's important is what that means to you. It's your relationship to Christ.
Mhm.
And so that's why it bothers me in churches that make the decision that I'm not worthy to
Yep.
take it,
Yes.
because it's my relationship with God. It's not my relationship, you know, it's not for you to tell me what my relationship with God is.
And having spoken to folks who you know, are parts of those churches, usually what you'll hear is, we're not saying you aren't worthy. We're actually doing that out of love and concern for you. Because if you take it and you don't, you're not quite taking it the right way, you're actually condemning yourself. And we don't want you to do that. We love you so much that we want to shut you out from the table.
That was definitely
We
the
want
way
you to
that
go home
it was, it was taught to me, because I still have scars from my youth and being raised in Catholicism, because our priest that was instructing us for First Holy Communion said that if you weren't in the right mindset, if you didn't have all your sins in the line and forgiveness for them and stuff like that, the host would actually change into a chunk of flesh in your mouth and so, yeah, you want to talk about somebody who's messed up in the head? Right here.
Well, my
I said the guy
mother-in-law
that was
was
teaching
told
you.
if she was not a virgin and got married in the Catholic Church, that red dots would appear on her dress, and she believed that.
Yeah, I mean, it was just when you're what, 8 years old or 10 years old, whatever, you know, going through this, and that's what the priest is telling you. It's a little scary, you know. Well, yeah, you know, there's a lot of things that have been wrong throughout things. So this is
Official teaching.
probably not, but you know, it was just one way of
Priest.
you know,
Yeah, exactly.
one way of
Right.
somebody trying to, you know, make sure that you understood the seriousness of what was going to happen. So, you know, this whole section, you know, on Holy Communion is like, well, it was really interesting to me.
So we're not cannibals, right?
Well, and on 164, there's a whole section where they talk about that, who's worthy.
That was
And
excluding some people from.
it's your faith that makes you worthy.
Yeah.
Well, and remember, I think what really
Gluten-free. You know,
what I made sure to highlight here was, yeah, on page 165.
yeah.
It is the power of God and not the power of our faith that makes Jesus present for us.
Yeah.
You know, I think our faith helps us, helps communion to actually feed and nourish us. But yeah, I just like how concisely they said that. You know, it's about what God does. It is more about God and less about us, which, you know, as many times as we say that and remember that. We as people are more or less hardwired to make it about ourselves.
It's like baptism.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's what God does.
I mean, it does say we have to have believing hearts and know what this symbolizes. So, yeah, that is important. That I think you still need to know that, but shouldn't be telling you you can't have it if you believe and are baptized.
Do the Catholics still use that tabernacle to store the
Mhm.
leftover Ulster bread?
As far as I know.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, well, it was just a different way. They said, once the bread is blessed, okay, that's Jesus's body. Just respect it. You don't throw it out in the grass. You almost, I guess it's not quite to the point of worship, but you revere it. So, you know, it's just a whole different approach to it. It was my understanding of it.
So if you look on page 161, you can see the picture of the monstrance, which is you would put consecrated bread in there, and it'll be used kind of like an icon. You don't worship it. Officially, you are not supposed to worship it. I think some people got the impression that's what they were supposed to do, but officially it's supposed to be the sort of thing that you kind of use as a starting point for meditation and reflection, and so on. And they still make these, they still sell these. You can look in any church supply catalog and you can get yourself a monstrance if you're into that sort of thing. So yeah, I think, and again, it's the sort of thing where I would draw a parallel with, you know, either an icon, or sometimes they talk about the cult of the saints, not cult used in the pejorative sense, but just, you know, in a sense of particular group of practices. You're not supposed to be worshiping the saints. There's one God. They're supposed to be kind of examples, or, you know, you kind of meditate on, you know, look how God was at work in this person. But for many people, that was putting a little too fine of a point on it. And then when you take your faith and you kind of impose it on other groups of people who had a tradition of worshiping elders and that sort of thing, then it becomes all sorts of complicated, which is way more than we can get into today. But let me make another point here. Page 154, we have, of course, the depiction of the Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci there. And in the middle paragraph, it says, "This is not just a sentimental remembering of a long past event, but an entering into Jesus' story. Recollection, praise, thanksgiving, and a confession of faith all at once." And it reminded me of something that I've come across several times during Lent, particularly looking at our Hebrew Bible passages. You know, God remembered. God remembered his promise to Abraham. God remembered the Israelites. God remembered David's faithfulness. God remembered his people and promised a new covenant. And it's this idea that in Scripture, and remember, this is the faith that would have formed Jesus. So when Jesus says, "Do this in remembrance of me," I think it's the same idea at work. God remembering is not, you know, like I am halfway home and it suddenly pops into my mind, "Oh dear, I should have stopped and picked up a gallon of milk on the way home. I remember now that I should have done that." That is not God remembering. God is, I don't think, in the habit of forgetting, certainly not in the habit of forgetting promises that God has made to us. But in Scripture, remembering is making the promises of the past become the good news of the present. So when God remembers, it's kind of like God says, yes, the time is now to fulfill what had been spoken before. So when Jesus says, "Do this in remembrance of me," We are bringing that promise out of the past. We are bringing it into the present. So I want to make sure I throw that out there for people.
I also thought these other depictions of the Last Supper were pretty interesting. We talked about that on Monday. We don't really think of anything other than red wine usually, but guinea pig, I'm assuming it's not the guinea pig that we know.
It is.
It is?
It is.
Yes,
Oh, good lord.
I had that for dinner once.
On my list.
Oh.
See?
Well, I will try anything if I don't know what it is.
Oh, we
So-
knew what it was. She
Oh, yeah,
had
no.
it all.
I just know my little pet.
And
I know, I love getting.
And so-
I travel with.
Jane mentioned an interesting or a term worthy of discussion, commemorate, which, for the word loving among us, comes from memory and comes from con, to do something together. We remember it together. And if we are thinking about it in terms of a scriptural thought on remembering, like it is something out of the past that God is bringing to life in the present, then yeah, that's great. We love that. But it is also the term used by some churches. They say, communion is commemorative. We just do it, because, it helps us remember who Jesus was and what Jesus was about. It's commemorative. Nothing is actually happening in terms of Jesus being present, but we're remembering him. It's purely symbolic, and that's that.
That's basically what the Baptists do.
Just a side note, that painting of the Last Supper is on a wall that is bigger than this wall and taller. It's not a painting, it's a painting on the wall.
The mural.
Yeah.
Or is it a fresco?
It's a fresco.
A fresco,
Okay,
yeah.
there we go.
What is a fresco?
Well, I have something that I've thought about.
A fresco means you have put the paint on wet plaster. I don't know what the significance of it is. You would
It's
need,
in a convent.
if you really want to know, you could probably call and ask my mom. She's big into art stuff, but fresco.
What, I always think of what did Jesus really want us to remember on this? Because my way of looking at it is, if he wanted us to just remember, he could have just said, here's bread, here's wine, do this in remembrance of me. But when he throws in the part about, this is my body, this is my blood, that is kind of like one of those things like, well, let me think about that, because I don't understand. We want to make everything make sense, so we come up with transfiguration or consubstantiation and the other things to kind of make sense to us. But a thing that came to me is that maybe God wants us to know that he wants to be a part of us, just like when you eat something, it comes into your body, it becomes an actual part of you. This way, remember me by letting me be part of you. You are my children, I want to be with you. So I'm thinking of more of that way. To me, it's almost immaterial as to whether you believe it's an actual body part or something like that. It's the other part of it that I think is the important part of the remembrance.
Yeah.
I think it is all those things. I think it is meant to be. It is very simple, but yet it carries many complex meanings. And I think what you said about, we really have to stop and meditate on it. We really need to kind of, there is a piece of it that is mystery, and it is mystery in the sense, it is not like Robert Stack Unsolved Mysteries, where when they play the reruns 25 years later, they say, update. Yeah, we actually found this person because we had enough time. But it's a mystery where you don't anticipate finding the concrete answer. You kind of sit in front of it and ponder it. And yeah, I think a piece of it is God's presence in a sense that is so close to us that we actually take it into ourselves. I think a piece of it is, this is my body given for you. Jesus died for us. This is my blood shed for you. Jesus was not an apparition or something that just looked human. That he's as human as you and me. If he got punctured with a nail or stabbed with a spear, he would bleed just like any of us. We remember Jesus was fully human. Do this in remembrance of me. This idea of him dying so that we may have life. We remember that. I think it is at work on many levels. And I think that is very much purposeful.
Well, it says here on page 165 that Luther did not believe it necessary to explain the divine mystery and was satisfied to believe that the body and blood of Christ were present, along with and under, is his formulation, the bread and wine.
Yes, in, with, and under. That is what they drilled into us in school.
Well, Jesus said a lot of things that even the apostle didn't quite understand when he was talking in parables and things like that. So, it doesn't surprise me that this is another one.
Right.
That, you really have to, maybe come to grips with it on your own and get your own understanding of what it means, But yeah, we tend to try to make things make sense to us. And some things just don't.
And I think it is, I think for a lot of those things, it is less about settling on, you know what, I think I'm at a point where I've got a handle on this. It is less about that and more about the process of saying, I'm at a different place in my faith now than I was whenever the last time I thought about this was. I gotta thrash around with this a little bit more. I think it's more about that, is about the active engagement with it. It's more about that than it is about, yes, I got the answer. Because then we turn into Gnostics. We're like, I got the secret knowledge, and if you get on board with me, I'm going to give you the secret knowledge, and you can be as saved as me. And all it'll cost you is $19.95 a month. So.
Is that a one-time charge or is that a subscription?
That's a subscription. Subscription, definitely.
And is something being lost that we don't use the common cup anymore? Because you're not only, sharing with God, but
well,
you are using the common cup.
Yeah,
It's just that we're being more sanitary about it.
Yeah.
Because it's all coming out of the same cup.
So
same bottle.
What? Same. Well, sometimes it's two bottles because we finish one and move on to the next.
We blend them.
But what Terry said, what I was going to say. So as we were in the process of thinking in 2020, perhaps we will re-examine our communion practices. One of the, I really was drawn to, I was really turned off by the pre-packaged, you pull off the foil and take the little square of whatever it was, and then you peel off the next one and you do your shot. That to me really individualized it in practice, that for me it would start to send that message of, this is about me and my Jesus. And I don't think that most people would, who have been coming and worshiping and sharing communion would leap to that conclusion. But I see it as the sort of thing that you keep doing that long enough and that might start to seep in. And so in kind of examining what are different practices, I was really drawn to the pouring chalice for exactly that reason, that we are all we are all drinking from the same cup. Everyone is served, from the same vessel. We just do that without actually putting it to our mouths. And as I think I shared in a newsletter article, I started looking in some of the church supply catalogs for pouring chalices, and I went, they want me to spend what? And so eventually I connected with Derek up at IU Northwest, who's an art instructor and does ceramics, and said, hey, this is kind of what I'm looking for. And he said, this actually sounds really interesting. I want to look into this a little bit. Let me work with you. And eventually he called me up and said, hey, I got a few things for you to check out. And he had like 8 or 9 patens and 7 or 8 chalices. And he said, I kind of got some different inspiration for some of these. And that's how we ended up with that. So in my mind, I don't know that in my mind, we are not losing that sense of communion, of communing. At the same time, I also need to say that I've spent a lot of time thinking about it and kind of reasoning with it, and that not everybody goes through that same process. So, perhaps it is useful for me to emphasize that for folks now and again. I'm just up to my eyeballs in it, so I just assume everybody is thinking about these sorts of things before they go to bed at night.
On a practical note, since I do altar guild, is everybody still wanting that one middle blank circle, or can we start filling it in again?
I don't know, I think it's easier to fill that way. I think it's easier to take them out, because I do everything too.
I think it's easier to leave that one.
I mean, I don't know about second service, but we pretty much complete one tray. Sometimes
we go in the second.
Sometimes I take on the one side, we go into the second tray, but
I was just.
Kim is also the one who says, I want the pancake on the bottom of the spoon. No.
I was just wondering.
I just think no one's, manhandling those cups, so I don't think it really matters. Bring your own cup if you're creepy.
And there were churches that did that. They said, everyone bring your own cup. Okay.
I'm bringing a big one.
Like a big.
I mean, so.
Like a real big.
and then they got the box or what?
Yeah, there you go.
If it was me, I would probably have to leave it in my office, because sure as I'm sitting here, every weekend I would show up and go,
yeah,
forgot my cup. Shoot, which is exactly what I would say. So let me ask, any other happy plumbing?
Good luck, honey.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Anything else we saw in the book that caught our attention? I have a couple of the questions here that I want to throw at you, but let me first ask what else we saw in the text that.
I kind of like that allusion to the road on Emmaus. I never thought of it in that way before. On page 160 to 169.
Yep.
That they didn't recognize him, they're talking to him, but it wasn't until they shared the bread that they realized who it was.
So I read a commentary on Luke's gospel. It was written by a seminary professor. And he was talking about in class one day, the guy said, a student said something about, the professor said, how do you think Jesus looked based on Luke's gospel? And he said the guy was a football player, and the guy raised his hand and he said, I think Jesus was probably like 6'5", 6'6", 280, 300 maybe. And the professor said, I noticed that this guy was like 6'5", 280. And the professor said, tell me more about that. Why do you think that? And he said, in Luke's gospel, Jesus is always at the table. Jesus is always eating, which, many people have observed. But then he said, the student said, it's like the walk to Emmaus. they don't recognize Jesus until he starts eating. And I thought that was just a really fascinating insight, like
He walked
Jesus.
it all off.
Right.
Unlike us.
So, but yeah, that notion of they don't recognize Jesus until he is at the table, till he is sharing fellowship, till he's breaking bread with people.
Yeah, but if he was 6'6", I think they'd be recognized.
That's true, particularly.
Nobody wants that age.
Yeah.
Size.
I remember studying in college, and one of the things they mentioned, we were reading about Roman military campaigns. They said that at the time of Emperor Augustus, when there was a abortive invasion of Germany, the average Roman was 5'1". The average German was 5'7", which I just thought was very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you look at the old stuff in the museums and how small it is.
Mhm. Even,
Doorway.
I was gonna say,
Chairs.
you walk to some of the old churches, and even I was kind of going, it's kind of little. So, I mean, if I'm having to duck under it, those old time Spaniards were little people.
You see the knights in armor stuff there. That's
Yeah.
That, the blue box in, on 168, I thought was pretty interesting about this Boldenstein guy.
Mhm.
He was, obviously not looked too favorably upon doing what he did, if y'all read it about how he gave the sacrament. But really, I mean, Jesus didn't do any of the stuff that we do now, right? I mean, he probably had dirty feet and sandals and and gave it out. So, but then I liked further down where it said, it's okay to do change, but you kind of need to be considerate of those that are struggling with the change before you make all these changes all at once. So obviously he was kind of radical, this Boldenstein, and what he did on that Christmas day, but really, I don't know that all of it was so bad.
Sometimes people are even against change that is going to benefit them. It's interesting. And I have often said, Jesus would never make it past one of the candidacy committees to get ordained. They would bounce him on day one.
Arguing with them.
Really? You want to argue with that? I see you got this pitcher of water here on the table in case we get thirsty. Watch this. So what else? What else is jumping out at us?
They always have wine, but the form of the bread can change. It's kind of random based on personal taste or gluten-free or whatever that is.
So yes, there is discussion between churches, should it be just bread? Should it reflect, like our daily bread, which in most cases is going to be leavened in some sort? Should it be unleavened? If we're saying, well, this is a Passover celebration, should it be unleavened bread? And there is debate about that. And interestingly enough, I did ask, the bread that we use for communion here, it is leavened with either baking soda or baking powder, not with yeast. So it is not leavened with yeast. So
We don't bake it anymore?
Yeah, we do.
Technical sense, is it unleavened? Because the yeast or the leaven is what is considered unclean or whatever. I don't know, but the guideline I was taught, and people talked about, well, what could you use for communion? The guideline I was given was it should be staple food and festive drink. So they said, would it be culturally appropriate in a Korean congregation to have rice?
I'm thinking tequila and tacos. Just saying.
Yeah, it's
You could use a taco shell.
Yeah.
well, and
Says a block at the end.
Somebody did send me a picture, it was very clearly photoshopped, of when Pope Benedict was newly elected, and they showed him at the altar, and he was lifting up a pretzel, and then he was lifting up a big cup of beer. I said, I get on board with that. I'm not gonna go ahead and try and break that out on Easter Sunday or anything, but
Who knows, you might get more members back. There you go, there you go.
When did the wafers replace bread?
I want to say those came along in the Middle Ages. And I believe the idea was wafers do not make crumbs. You don't have to worry about a crumb falling to the floor, whereas if you have a loaf of bread and you're tearing off pieces, but if you have a wafer.
That's Jesus' body on the floor then.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
Somebody might step on it, yeah.
Right, depending on your piety around the host, a wafer will not make crumbs. They also keep better and are uber convenient. That's probably just a side note, but I think the original reason was it eliminates crumbs.
Yeah, you can use the same rationale for why they weren't passing out wine too.
Mm.
You know, not beside, but you know, spills.
Yep.
What do you do with spills?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, wafers have been around for a long time.
When did they start offering like juice instead of wine? I believe when I was, when I was in confirmation, we only had wine because that was Christ's blood.
Right.
And if someone, preferred or needed juice as an alternative, they weren't looking at communion the right way, because that is not wine, that is Christ's blood.
Right. I know it goes back quite some time. So the Welch of Welch's grape juice was a Methodist pastor, and he came upon a way of bottling juice so it would not go bad, because temperance from alcohol was a tenet of his faith. So in some churches, it has for quite some time been the tradition to not even have the wine. As far as, I remember as when I was younger, there was always juice offered as an alternative. So
It came up
of course,
because of people being alcoholics.
I wondered about that.
I was gonna say, there's a few different reasons for it, I think one of them is, we do not want to exclude anyone from communion because they can't consume alcohol, whether it is they're in recovery, or usually when I visit people at the hospital, I'll bring juice, because sometimes you're not supposed to have alcohol when you are having medicine.
Isn't the word in Greek, doesn't it refer to fruit of the vine rather than, and it was just assumed it could be wine, but it could also be grape juice, but grape juice wasn't a thing that kept. It
Right.
always
Yes.
turned into, pretty bad wine if you just let it sit there.
Yes.
Without watching it.
Yeah, there's always
But-
wild yeast.
In the
on it.
Catholic Church,
Yeah,
Right.
but-
the first communion.
So yeah,
Isn't
it talks about the fruit of the
Do
vine,
they get wine after?
but yet, Jesus lifted up the cup, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. Like, the idea that they would have had cups of grape juice at the Last Supper is,
Yeah.
it just would not have happened for exactly what Dan said. One of the reasons people drank wine was wine kept. So,
Why do you have to drink a bottle of wine within 3 days if it's a good bottle of wine? I have no problem doing it at night, but but usually it's like about 3 days, you gotta get kind of rid of it.
other questions, thoughts, concerns, insights?
We were freshmen in high school.
All right, so people will plan to gather next week in my absence. and we'll tackle session 7.
It's a lot more reading, just so you all know. If you haven't read it.
Awesome.
It's fun. Where this last one was.
Okay,
But there's a lot of pictures.
well, good. Well, in that case, let us close, and we will use stanza 3 of this hymn by Martin Luther as our closing prayer. Lord, bestow on us your grace and favor, that we follow Christ our Savior and live together here in love and union, nor repent this blessed communion. O Lord, have mercy. Let not your good spirit forsake us. By this holy banquet remake us. Give your church, Lord, to see days of peace and unity. O Lord, have mercy. Amen.
Amen. Thank you once again. Ciao, y'all.